If I have been able to see further, it was only because I stood on the shoulders of giants. Isaac Newton. Today, we are honoring three accomplished men who have helped us get to the place where we are today in child and family services. We're going to look at the incredible accomplishments of our dear friends and colleagues, Nicholas Simons, Bill McArthur, and Maurice Squires. Nicholas Simons. In his role as director with the Sechelt Nation, Nicholas Simons oversaw public health, child welfare, alcohol and drugs, financial assistance, and justice programs. He negotiated funding for innovative preventative health and social services, which led to a dramatic reduction in adversarial child welfare intervention and improvements in health outcomes in all age groups. Prior to his employment with Sechelt Nation, he worked as a child protection social worker for the Ministry for Children and Families in Sechelt and North Vancouver. From his statement in 2001, one of my priorities is to improve services and to return responsibility for child and family services to Aboriginal communities, said Nicholas. The renewed agreement will give the band the support and resources it needs to protect the well-being of Sechelt children and families during this transition. A transitional framework is included in the agreement to recognize that the band can make its own child welfare laws. The agreement would remain in place for 2 years or until the band was able to develop its own legislation under the Federal Sechelt Indian Band Self-Government Act. Such legislation must meet or exceed the provincial government's child welfare standards. Nicholas Simon was first elected MLA for Powell River Sunshine Coast in 2005 and was re-elected in 2009, 2013, 2017, and 2020. Nicholas served as the chair of the Social Policy Committee of Caucus and on the Select Standing Committee on Finance and Government Services. Nicholas has also served as the opposition critic for tourism, sport and the arts, human rights, immigration and multiculturalism, the Ministry for Children and Family Development and Community Living BC. Nicholas served as a chair of the Social Policy Committee of Caucus and on the Select Standing Committee on Finance and Government Services. Nicholas has also served as the opposition critic for tourism, sport and the arts, human rights, immigration and multiculturalism, the Ministry for Children and Family Development and Community Living BC. He has worked as a consultant for the federal Northwest Territories and British Columbia and First Nations governments in areas including law reform, child welfare, legal education, and crime prevention. A priority for Nicholas was to bring back independent oversight to the child welfare system. It was a focus of his first session after being elected in 2005 and resulted in the Ted Hughes Review, which called for the establishment of an Office of the Representative for Children and Youth. In February of 2006, Simons was selected to join the first iteration of the Select Standing Committee for Children and Youth, continuing this role until 2013. Nicholas was a member of the Select Standing Committee for Children and Youth from 2006 to 2013, and then chaired the committee in 2017. Nicholas served as a Minister of Social Development and Poverty Reduction and as a Vice Chair of the Cabinet Committee on Social Initiatives, and was a member of the Cabinet Working Group on Mental Health, Addictions, and Homelessness. During his time as Minister, Nicholas supported the passing of the 2021 Accessible BC Act that brought in a new accessibility standards and the development of a provincial poverty reduction strategy. In his farewell address, Nicholas acknowledges the significance his role as a Director of Health and Social Services for the Sechelt Nation and Director of Indigenous Delegation was throughout his career. He speaks to the honor and privilege of working with such incredible leaders in the field, such as Warner Adam, Nita Walcom, Mary T.G., Cindy Blackstock, Maurice Squires, Deb Foxcroft, and others. Join me in celebrating and acknowledging the amazing career of Nicholas Simons. Another giant that we get to honor today is one that comes from a place that you would not normally find a hero in Indigenous child and family, and that is Bill McArthur, who worked tirelessly with us as a true partner coming from Indigenous Service Canada. The first thing that elders tell us is you show up. You show up in the room, you show up in the space, and you acknowledge that you do have a part in that tension. Eventually, the system we're in will change because of people like Bill. In the work, there's going to be other people coming along, and we need more allies. We need more people to come along with us, not to walk in front of us and make all the decisions, but walk with us. Chief Cadmus Delorme said, as he was talking about resuming jurisdiction, was that we need the government in the car. You're no longer in the driver's seat. We need you to take the passenger seat. And I feel like Bill has always been in the passenger seat. He has come in relational ways, walking alongside and always keeping kids and families at the very center of his thinking and in his heart. In this way, Bill has been more than an ally during his career. Years ago, before the many names of Indigenous Service Canada, it was called DIA, it was called Diane, it was called ANSI, and then ISC. After many different managers, directors, funding officers, Bill McArthur became part of the Indigenous Child and Family Services Directors Partnership Circle. It was a rough time when Bill came into the fold. There was underfunding, there was a lack of certainty, and of course, the court case against Canada, charging Canada with discrimination, had been initiated in 2007. There were ever-changing policies, ever-changing faces of the government partners, and at the time, you have to remember, we were under the Harper regime. Bill walked into this situation, into this environment, and he did so with patience, with grace and understanding. Working alongside Bill and others, we developed a Made in BC approach of prevention. Although this approach really reflected the cultural ways of being of Indigenous people in BC, it reflected a needs-based approach. Unfortunately, due to political interference, we got denied. As we were fighting to get prevention funding in British Columbia, Bill was with us. He supported that as much as he could. Bill has said that from all the highlights of his career, his role as a witness at the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal is one of them. He was a witness for Canada for 2 days, which he said gave him the ability to truly understand what the intention of that decision and ruling was. With the intention and the spirit of doing things differently, being innovative, and making sure that children and families benefited from the money, we were able to work in partnership and really do some great things. Partnership is another big achievement of Bill's. We have to remember in the early days, it was difficult to have a really good relationship with our partners because of the lack of funding. We didn't have enough funding for the correct policy, research, all the support work that we needed to conduct to ensure that we were bringing our best selves and our best voices and the best information to the table to make sure that we were strengthening Indigenous child and family. Bill, again, being a leader in the country, advocated and supported and approved funding to go to the agencies to support the partnership table. This has made all the difference in where we are today. Without that funding, we would not have become our Children Our Way Secretariat, or we would have not had an Indigenous Child and Family Service Directors Forum table. Bill believed in this because he understood that we were working towards common goals. He understood that we were all working together for the betterment of our Indigenous children and families. After these years of hard work and diligence, Bill wanted to make sure that the work was left in good hands, that the mission and vision of doing things differently would continue, strengthening the philosophical view of what true partnership is, maintaining relationships, putting community first, and ensuring the best for our children. His legacy is reflected in the work and passion of Gregory Miller. Bill's keen intellect, passion, and hard work led us to being the leader in British Columbia. Every time we had a difficult situation with the lack of prevention funding, the lack of voice, the lack of understanding, it seemed to me that Bill was standing with us to fight and to advocate to ensure that whatever changes were made in BC really met the needs of our communities, our children and families. Bill has worked tirelessly with us to ensure again that funding kept flowing to the agencies, that everything that we did would not leave our nations in jeopardy and not leave our nations without prevention funding. I know Bill advocated and went to headquarters and said, this does not make sense to BC. I know he went to headquarters and fought for us and said, this is what's in the best interest of Indigenous children in British Columbia. It is all these efforts that have made all the differences to where we're at today in BC. Again, British Columbia is a leader within child and family in many places because of Bill and people like him. When we write the history and tell the story of Indigenous child welfare in British Columbia and in fact in Canada, Bill McArthur's name will stand out for all the accomplishments he's done, not only for himself, but more importantly for our children and our families in BC. For this, let's stand and acknowledge the great work of Bill McArthur. Sometimes in life, we are privileged to know a leader whose name will stand the test of time, who will have contributed so significantly for the betterment of the world that when young people and those not yet born speak of him, they will speak with him in reverence. They will say his name with reverence. Maurice Squires is one of these ones. Maurice's hereditary chief name is Mulgex. This is literally means the one who does the heavy lifting. Who is Maurice Squires? In his own words, as written in his 2004 thesis, Liberating Our Children Revisited, Maurice writes, as a First Nations person, it is important for me to preface this piece of writing with a contextualizing statement that defines my own cultural and social location. By enunciating the place I have come to in my life's work so far, I am paying homage to my ancestors and demonstrating my respect for those who may encounter these words. This is what I've been taught to do, and it's from this place of appropriate respect that I approach all of the work that I do, including the writing of this thesis. A member of the Nisga'a Nation, wolf from the house of Bismarck's, the Bear's Den, one of 60 houses or bloodlines in the Nass Valley, Maurice Squires was born and raised in northwestern British Columbia in the village Gitwansilk, where he also received both his formal and informal education. His professional and personal experiences stem from the roots of his home. As I look out my window, I see the Wolf Clan territory, the mountains, trees, and the Nass River, which have been in our family for hundreds of generations. I have returned home and have lived here for 30 years of my life, writes Maurice in 1994. In his home territory, Maurice Squires spent 7 years as the homeschool adult education coordinator for School District Number 92, Nisga'a and Northwest Community College. He was a social development worker in his home community for 10 years, and he was a founding member and president of the Northwest Band Social Worker Association. Under Maurice's leadership, the Northwest Band Social Workers Association successfully saw over 40 First Nations social workers from northern communities get their BSW degrees without having to travel south and becoming disconnected from their families and cultural responsibilities at home. Maurice's insight and experience was also instrumental in setting up the UNBC social work program that today is still helping Northerners get the education they need to stay in and help their communities. He later sat on the Board of Governance for the University of Northern BC for 6 years. In the early 1980s, a small group of individuals, including Warner Adam, Deb Foxcroft, Deanne George, Steve Cozy, Elsie Paul, Gloria Wilson, and Maurice Squires came together to find and create opportunities for training and to advocate for changes to child welfare policy and funding. In 1994, this group incorporated as a Caring for First Nations Children Society and began providing delegation training for the staff of the newly created delegated Aboriginal agencies, as well as supporting the assertions and aspirations of BC First Nations communities. Maurice served as a president for the Caring for First Nations Children Society for 10 years, stepping down in 2008. This Caring for First Nations Children Society was led at that time by none other than Cindy Blackstock. The Caring Society rebranded and became the Indigenous Perspective Society in 2014 and continues to this day to offer training programs for Indigenous child and family service agencies. From 1986 to 1992, Maurice was a member of the Social Policy Advisory Committee, subcommittee of the Tribal Forum, which itself was a forerunner of the organization now known as the British Columbia First Nation Summit. The role of the SPAC was to recommend revisions to social policies established by the federal and provincial governments. At that time, a moratorium had been placed on the adoption of Aboriginal children into non-Aboriginal families by the province of BC, and a federal moratorium on the development of new First Nations child and family services agencies was in place. SPAC gradually became involved in the area of child welfare policy up until 1992. Maurice was a founding member of the BC Aboriginal Child Care Society in 1996 and continues his seat as vice president today. BC Acts is an innovative, unique organization that provides support to early childhood development programs and services within community. BC Acts also provides early childhood education professionals, support service to professionals and Indigenous children and families access to early learning programs, resources, training, research, and community services that are culturally based. Again, Maurice Squires uses his cultural teachings and his brilliant mind to provide input into those early childhood development initiatives. Under Maurice's leadership, Nisga'a Child and Family became the second delegated agency in BC. The Nisga'a Child and Family Services Delegation Enabling Agreement was the first such agreement negotiated under the terms of the BC Child, Families, and Community Services Act. The initial DEA for Nisga'a Child and Family Services expired with implementation of the Nisga'a Final Agreement Treaty in 2000, which Maurice helped negotiate. Maurice's principal diligence when sitting across the negotiating table from the Crown during treaty talks led to a major precedent for First Nations child welfare that is referenced by Indigenous peoples around the world. Maurice's work to entrench inherent rights in Nisga'a-based child welfare authority within the Nisga'a Final Agreement has been widely cited in legal briefs and textbooks. Maurice has contributed to many, many pieces of legislation, policies, frameworks, and innovations to ensure that Indigenous children and families and their ways of being in their unique cultural milieu is reflected. He has contributed to the current CFCSA. He has also contributed to the development of the Aboriginal operations and practice standards and indicators. Maurice was successful in negotiating Cooperative Aboriginal Social Work Training Program curriculum and has spent many years as the Director of Aboriginal Policy and Practice with Aboriginal Services Branch at MCFD. Maurice has also participated in MCFD committees pertaining to practice and audit review, the Social Service Review of the BC Social Work Act, AOPSI, and other works. Maurice's appointment as a Director of Northern Health in 2012 recognized that healthcare needed to be designed and delivered by the population it is serving. He has served as Director of Northern Health for 6 years. Within academia, Maurice's MSW thesis has been cited numerous times, and he holds a bachelor's and master's degree in social work from the University of Victoria. In her globally recognized book on Indigenous methodologies, Maurice's friends, Dr. Maggie Kovach, quoted his statement, "If you're not solving the problem within the context of the culture, you're creating another form of assimilation." Indigenous master's and PhD students from Australia, the American Southwest, and around the world have cited this specific quote in their graduate thesis. Maurice's words and work are truly serving Indigenous peoples at home and around the world. Maurice is truly one of the ancestors that those not yet born will speak of, and they will speak of him again with reverence. Let's all join together and give Maurice our gratitude. Again, if I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants. Nicholas Simons, Bill McArthur, and Maurice Squires are now standing on their shoulders. We honor their commitment to justice for our people and for our children. We honor their dedication to transforming systems. We honor their actions, their perseverance, and their bravery to make change. Together, we stand and raise our hands to Nicholas Simons, Bill McArthur, and Maurice Squires. We are all taller and can see further because of you. Thank you, thank you, thank you.